Welcome to Real Recaps. Today we'll look at a thriller action film from 2017 titled Blood Red Sky. The movie begins at an airbase, where the military is busy preparing for the landing of a suspected hijacked plane. Seconds later, the base's commanding officer arrives, and the other officers inform him that there are snipers everywhere in case their assumption is true. Moments later, the plane lands on the runway with the direction of an officer. The commanding officer immediately talks to the man in the cockpit. However, the man suddenly leaves, and the military discovers explosives in the aircraft. After that, the snipers see movement in the rear hatch, and they see a boy come down. The troop on the ground cautiously walks towards the boy, and then they take him away from the plane. Afterward, the sniper sees the man returning to the cockpit, and the commanding officer immediately warns the man not to make a move, or else they will fire. The man claims that he is not a terrorist, and he is injured, but the commanding officer still believes that he is a hijacker. So the commanding officer instructs the man to free the passenger, but the man refuses. Following that, a woman attempts to interview the boy from the plane named Elias, but the boy remains silent, as the events before the incident flashes back at him. The scene changes into a bald and sickly-looking woman named Nadia, taking her pills and putting on her wig. Meanwhile, her son Elias is at the airport, taking care of their baggage with the help of a kind man. After checking their luggage, Elias calls his mother to tell her that everything went well, and he will be waiting for her. Moments later, Nadia arrives at the airport, and they go through the security checkpoint. The security officer finds a case of Nadia's medicine, and Nadia informs him that she has prescriptions for the drugs, so the security officer allows her. After that, Nadia leaves Elias at the gates, and she goes to the bathroom to take her medicine. But instead of giving her relief, Nadia's medicine causes her severe discomfort. At the same time, Elias befriends the physicist, the kind man who helped him earlier. Minutes later, Nadia comes out looking a bit weak, so the physicist offers her a seat. Nadia immediately refuses it, and she leaves with Elias. Subsequently, Nadia and Elias settle down on the plane with the other passengers. Following that, Nadia retakes her medicine, and records the date and time in her notebook. Nadia sees a photograph of her husband and baby Elias, and she laughs bitterly as memories play in her head. Then a flashback shows Nadia happily spending time with her husband and their newborn baby. They play around in the snow, and after that, they drive to get home. Suddenly, the car stops in the middle of the road. So her husband attempts to fix it, but he fails. After that, he leaves Nadia and Elias, trying to get help. The scene then returns to the present, where a couple of passengers argue with a host alias, 8-Ball. Their voices catch the passengers' attention, so they close the blind to settle. Suddenly, 8-Ball and his associates murder 3 air marshals. After that, 8-Ball comes out covered with blood, pulls out his gun, and his associates pull out their weapons too. The crooks' leader goes to the cockpit, and the plane's co-pilot is revealed to be one of the crooks. The leader announces that they are now in control, as they have reprogrammed the plane to be off the radar. The leader adds that they expect everyone to cooperate and follow their instructions, until they finish their operation, and if someone disobeys them, they will not hesitate to shoot. Then, the co-pilot lies to the air traffic control towers that they are experiencing technical problems, which explains why the radars cannot track the airplane. Then, the hijackers take the physicist and other guys, which creates commotion, so Elias grabs that opportunity to hide. Nadia quickly follows Elias, but 8-Ball sees them, and shoots Nadia several times. Elias cries as the hijackers take him away from Nadia. The hijackers assume that Nadia is dead, so the hijackers proceed to their next plan. Meanwhile, Nadia begins to relive her memories. The scene changes back to Nadia waiting in the car, as her husband has gone to get help. However, hours have passed, and her husband has not returned yet. So Nadia takes Elias with her to find her husband despite the cold weather. Shortly after, Nadia finds a local farmhouse, and sees fresh bloodstains on the floor. Nadia is in fear as she follows the bloodstains down to the basement, and a creature suddenly growls at her. Nadia screams and quickly closes the door. The creature barges in through the basement's window. Nadia tries to defend herself, but the creature manages to bite her. The moment after, the sunrise burns the creature to death, and Nadia realizes that a vampire bit her. The scene then returns to the present, where Nadia regains consciousness, but is still weak. She drags herself to the cargo hold, and she eats a dog while 2 of the hijackers are near her. Meanwhile, the hijackers force the physicist and 2 other guys to record a statement, stating that terrorists have seized the airplane for a suicide attack. Suddenly, one of the hijackers sees Nadia feeding on the dog's blood, so Nadia attacks him and kills him. After that, Nadia removes her dentures and eye contact lenses, which reveals her mutated eyes and fangs. Then, she injects her medicine onto herself, and she suddenly hears the hijacker's voice, looking for their member on the radio. As she hears that, Nadia decides to drink the dead man's blood, which heals her wound and makes her stronger. After that, Nadia leaves the cargo hold and hides in the meantime. Meanwhile, 8-Ball informs the passengers that the aircraft is booby-trapped, and a toxic nerve gas will be released on their cue. 8-Ball laughs maniacally as he taunts the passengers, and then he goes to the cargo hold with the rest of the hijackers. As soon as they get into the cargo hold, they see a bloodbath on the floor coming from the dog and their member. Meanwhile, Nadia finally comes out, and takes Elias into the cockpit, despite the other passengers' warning. Nadia sees that the aircraft is on autopilot, so she asks the passengers who can fly a plane. An aerospace engineering student volunteers, and the other passengers warn them that the hijackers will kill him. The physicist steps up, and informs everyone that they will die even if they keep still, as the hijackers planned everything. The student, Nadia, and Elias get into the cockpit, and try to take over the plane. Nadia instructs the student to let the hijackers out first, before they turn off the autopilot. Then, Nadia watches the monitors inside the cockpit, where she witnesses 8-Ball discovering that she is alive. Because of that, the hijackers come back up, and attempt to take over the cockpit, but Nadia refuses to let them in and guards the door. The hijackers feel the aircraft turning, so they kill a passenger, but Nadia maintains the door shut. Then, the leader instructs 8-Ball to get another passenger, so 8-Ball chooses a little girl. The leader holds the little girl as a hostage, but Nadia opens the door suddenly, and bites him before he can kill the girl. The student immediately locks the cockpit door, while Nadia attacks the hijackers. Suddenly, the leader starts to transform into a vampire, so Nadia immediately stabs him with a knife before he can fully change. After that, Nadia goes into the bathroom, where she sees what kind of a monster she has become. Meanwhile, 8-Ball takes Nadia's record notebook, and informs his colleagues that they are dealing with a vampire, and that the vampire is in fear of sunlight. However, some still refuse to believe the news, mainly because 8-Ball is a maniac. But 8-Ball dismisses the insults, and assigns himself to kill Nadia. 8-Ball starts looking for Nadia with an ultraviolet light, which is a substitute for sunlight. On the other hand, Nadia injects her medicine, which causes her to be weak again. As she endures the painful discomfort of the drug, the aftermath of her biting accident plays into her mind. The scene then changes into Nadia in an apartment, where she deals with the loss of her husband, and being bitten by a vampire. However, Nadia does not want to be a vampire, so she takes out her fangs, and returns to the local farmhouse to look for answers. While she wonders, an old vampire suddenly appears out of nowhere, and blames Nadia for killing his son. The old vampire shoots Nadia to stop her from becoming a vampire. The scene then returns to the present, where Elias sees the hijackers preparing to kill his mother. So Elias sneaks out, and runs to the bathroom to save his weakened mother. The hijackers arrive, so Nadia hides his son while she attempts to fight the hijackers. Suddenly, 8-Ball flashes the ultraviolet light on Nadia, which causes her to fall. After that, 8-Ball instructs the rest of the hijackers to take control of the cockpit, while he deals with the vampire Nadia. 8-Ball takes advantage of Nadia's weakness, and he takes her blood with a syringe. After that, 8-Ball prepares to stake Nadia, but Elias stops him with the leader's gun. However, 8-Ball is not scared of the little boy, so he tries to take the weapon from him, which causes Elias to shoot a window accidentally. It immediately causes depressurization of the plane, so the hijackers quickly barge in the cockpit, and the co-pilot gets the plane down to restore pressure. Meanwhile, 8-Ball runs down to the cargo hold, while the passengers use the oxygen masks for breathing. Nadia leaves her son to the physicist, and she chases 8-Ball. Nadia sees that 8-Ball is in a car down the cargo hold, so she shoots the glasses, which turns out to be bulletproof. Nadia looks for another way but fails, so she screams as she watches 8-Ball inject her blood into himself. 8-Ball immediately starts to transform, so Nadia puts the car on fire, attempting to burn him to ashes. As Nadia watches 8-Ball burn, the flashback of her encounter with the old vampire plays. The scene then shows Nadia beating the old vampire to death, and she gets the vials of the vampire suppressant. Right after that, she burns the farmhouse to the ground. The scene then gets back to the present, where the plane finally gets down to a lower altitude, which allows the passengers to breathe normally. Meanwhile, the co-pilot discovers the fire in the cargo hold, so he puts it out, stopping 8-Ball's death. The rest of the hijackers come back down to the cargo hold, while the co-pilot flies the plane. Nadia immediately runs away, but one of the hijackers sees her escaping, so he shoots her feet. The passengers see Nadia's horrifying face, so they quickly back up screaming. Meanwhile, the hijackers are unaware of what 8-Ball did to himself. 8-Ball gets out of the car, and he immediately bites the hijackers, and drinks their blood. On the other hand, a former soldier instructs the terrified passengers to find anything to protect themselves, so Elias shouts to warn his mother. After that, the former soldier and the physicist attempt to kill Nadia. Nadia fights back, almost killing them, but luckily, Elias stops his mother in time. Nadia realizes that her vampire instinct has taken over her for a moment. Suddenly, she hears 8-Ball and another hijacker who is also turned into a vampire. Nadia convinces the passengers that she means no harm, and she only wants to help. She immediately stops the vampires from getting back up, and the physicist helps her. The physicist gets bitten as 8-Ball almost comes in, but the former soldier shoots 8-Ball in his balls. Then Nadia locks the door immediately. After that, Nadia quickly goes to the physicist, and cuts off his infected hand. After that, Nadia hears her son screaming at them to weigh down the hatch. So Nadia and the former soldier immediately run upstairs. They kill a vampire, and put heavy baggage on the hatch. After that, the physicist calls for a doctor on the flight to help an injured passenger. Then the physicist and the three get into the cockpit. Nadia instructs the co-pilot to turn the plane around, but the co-pilot informs her that the aircraft does not have enough fuel to reach their destination, which means they either land soon or crash. Following that, the co-pilot and the physicist deal with the air traffic control tower, who is asking for their current status. Meanwhile, Elias finds a radio speaker from a dead hijacker. At the same time, the doctor informs the injured passenger that she cannot do anything, as he will bleed to death. The passenger attempts to bribe the doctor to help him, but the doctor tells him that his money will not help him. Out of desperation, the injured passenger drags himself downstairs and releases 8-Ball, in hopes of being bitten to survive. Unfortunately, 8-Ball kills him, and then he infects most of the passengers. The physicist sees a horde of passengers trying to get in the cockpit, and he attempts to open the door. The co-pilot stops him, explaining that once they open the door, they will not be able to shut it. Nadia realizes that they cannot land, as many passengers are now vampires, so she decides to sacrifice herself, by using the hijacker's explosive to kill herself and the infected passengers once they land. However, Elias disagrees with his mother's plan, and he goes to the cargo hold with the ultraviolet light. Elias uses this to escape the vampires to get the detonator, but he suddenly gets surrounded by the vampires. Elias loses the ultraviolet light, so he hides under a car, while the vampires attempt to reach him. Nadia sees her son's situation through the monitor, so she faces the physicist and makes him promise to look after her son. As soon as the physicist agrees, she quickly bites the co-pilot, while 8-Ball attempts to eat Elias. Nadia arrives in the cargo hold just in time, and fights 8-Ball. Unfortunately, 8-Ball dominates her and drinks her blood. Elias sees his mother getting defeated, so he uses the detonator to explode the cargo hold's door, and Nadia immediately pushes 8-Ball off the plane. Nadia falls because of weakness, so Elias quickly tries to keep his mother awake, but they are unaware that 8-Ball did not fall. However, the physicist sees 8-Ball from the monitor. So he steers the plane into the path of sunlight, which causes 8-Ball to burn to death. After that, Elias tries to use his blood to save his mother, but she rejects him and runs away. The scene changes to Elias telling the authorities that they need to let out the physicist. However, the authorities mistake his pleas as trauma, because they still believe the physicist is a terrorist. The medic calms down Elias with a sleep sedative, while the commanding officer patiently waits for the physicist to free the passengers. However, the physicist refuses, as all passengers have turned into vampires, so he escapes the cockpit, which causes the troops to barge in and find him. They immediately find the physicist in the cargo hold, and they arrest him, while the other soldiers search the plane. Meanwhile, Elias is transported to a hospital, where he demands his teddy bear before leaving. As the medic prepares to inject Elias with a sedative, Elias escapes from the straps, and runs back to the plane. On the other hand, the commanding officer witnesses his men get bitten by the vampires. Right then, Elias reaches the plane and screams for the physicist. However, he is surprised to see his mother eating a soldier. When Nadia looks at him, she fails to recognize her son, so she runs to him to eat him. Elias realizes that his mother is now gone, so he pulls out the detonator hidden in his teddy bear, activating the explosives. The whole plane is soon enveloped with fire, killing all vampires, including Nadia. Even though injured, the physicist runs to Elias, and the commanding officer orders his men to free the physicist. The physicist immediately hugs Elias, as he remembers that he promised Nadia that he would look after her son. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.